You are Locked On Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
The roller coaster ride for the 2024 Braves continued right down to the season's final day when 2 games were necessary, and the Braves took it down to the wire to punch their ticket to October, winning Game 2 of their doubleheader against the New York Mets after having their hearts broken in Game 1. Resiliency, some makeshift pitching plans, a little bit of everything was happening for the Braves in the final day of the regular season, but they completed their mission, and now they're on a flight out to San Diego to take on the Padres in the best 2 out of 3 wildcard round. That will get started on Tuesday. We'll talk all about it. We'll talk about the eventful doubleheader. We'll talk about some pitching plans for the Braves that are ultimately going to have to change because their ace left-hander Chris Sale is not going to be available to them in the wild card round. So lots to get to on this edition of the Braves Postcast. Make sure that you hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube, and subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. The Locked On Braves Postcast, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, Jake, we talked about all the scenarios. It was an eventful weekend. So many things had to go right for the Braves to even be in position to reach the postseason as they took it down to the wire. Once it became necessary to play this doubleheader, everybody knew what was on the line. Win and you get in. Game 1, that was a roller coaster ride in and of itself, which is the story of the 2024 Braves. Game 2, they were able to, I'll say it, maybe coast to a victory that seemed anything but a given the way that this season has unfolded.
Hey, I mean, you wouldn't expect anything less from this 2024 Braves team that has put us through the grinder. They've been through the grinder themselves with all the injuries that they've had, and lack of play. They haven't played up to their expectations. Matt Olson said that several times. They haven't played the way they're capable of, but still to be able to get to this point and get in, and, ultimately that's what it's about. And you get in and you get an opportunity, and the Braves were able to do that.
I guess the 2024 Braves wouldn't have it any other way than taking it down to the very last game to finally clinch, but they do. They take the final wild card spot. The Mets, of course, by virtue of their comeback win over the Braves in Game 1 of the doubleheader, and what was one of the craziest games of the year, they got to the postseason first. The Arizona Diamondbacks, meanwhile, are now left out of the postseason picture because a doubleheader split meant that the Braves and Mets, who had tiebreakers over Arizona, were going to be going to the postseason. So the Mets will go on back to Milwaukee, where they just were, and take on the Brewers in their wild card series. So that were the final results of this doubleheader day. But there is so much that we have to get into with this one. It was a wild day of baseball. I would say, Jake, in a lot of ways that Game 1 was kind of an instant classic. And if you're a Braves fan, though, unfortunately, the wrong team won.
Yeah, I've said before, if I could have just sat back and watched that game as a baseball fan, it probably would be one of the better baseball games that I've watched, especially just that 8th inning and how crazy it was. The Braves bullpen that's been so good all year, blowing a 3-run lead late, and then the Braves' response to that. I mean, we've watched this offense all year, Grant. I thought it was done and over with, and I thought they showed a lot of fight coming back and taking that lead. But then Francisco Lindor, who's been the Mets MVP, he comes up with a big hit for them. So it was a crazy game. Like I said, I wish I could have taken off my Braves bias and my Mets hate and just enjoyed that game like many fans did. But in the end, really didn't matter. The Braves came back and won the second game, and they just needed to win one of them, however you get it done. And they were able to win that second game.
Maybe we'll make it a little easier for you. We'll just get you some Braves colored glasses. You put them on and you take them off, and you're able to make the adjustment that you need right there. And that's all there is to it. But no, everybody, I think, was kind of going through it to differing degrees, of course, in social media, which is an echo chamber of just about any and everything. Yeah, I mean, there was the elated feeling of what you were seeing, then the misery of it wrenching back the other way, the excitement of it coming back for the Braves, because they carried that 3-0 lead into the 8th inning. Spencer Schwellenbach went back out to start that 8th inning, which, I mean, honestly, I had no problem with, especially since Joe Jimenez was warmed up and ready to go. I guess on the flip side of that coin, if you're going batter to batter, which the first hitter he faced in that one, to get granular here for a moment, it was an 11 pitch at bat. I think that kind of changed the face of what that 8th inning was going to be, and one hitter was going to be it for Schwellenbach as he pushed 100 pitches, and you did have 2 of your best relievers all season long gassed up and ready to go there. But it didn't work for Joe Jimenez, and it did not work for Raisel Iglesias. Some damage control to pull both of them before they threw too many pitches, though, made both of them available to be instant redemption stories in getting the job done in Game 2. But yeah, things got a little bit crazy. and the 2-run homer by Francisco Lindor after that wild 8th inning was the blow for the Mets, the killing blow that they needed in order to punch their ticket to October. But I think you're right. And I mean, I was sitting there and watching just the reaction of the press box. Everybody's typing up their game stories, and all of a sudden, you got to go ahead and hit delete because this game rewrote itself a few times.
It did. Like I said, just a wild one. And I'm right there with you. And I said it before that 8th inning. I said, you just send Swellenbach back out there, go batter to batter with him. But after you had that long at bat to Taylor and the double, and you had your guys ready to go. I mean, I don't know what else you want Snit to do there. Maybe you can give Swellenbach one more batter. But, I mean, you had your guys that have gotten you to this point, and Jimenez and Iglesias that have been so good, and even Pierce Johnson. He comes out for the 9th inning, and he gives up a 2-run homer. So it's unfortunate. You had your 3 best relievers ready to go in this one with a 3-0 lead late, and they couldn't get it done. And that's not on Snitker. It's on those guys that just couldn't deliver. But I thought it was the right call, and certainly wipes out what was a just fantastic start from Spencer Swellenbach, who was unbelievable in this one.
But I don't think that's going to be lost on most Braves fans or anybody that was watching this doubleheader as a baseball fan. I mean, you got to recognize that 28 other teams weren't playing on this day. I mean, you kind of had center stage in a lot of ways. And I know it was going to be anticlimactic probably for whoever won game 1, and then game 2 would not be quite the same level of intensity. And that may be part of the deal, but you still got to go out there and win. You don't just get to throw your hat and your glove out there and win a baseball game. And the Braves were able to do enough offensively. It wasn't an inspired performance there, but on the mound, they certainly got one out of Grant Holmes, who was not expected to start game 2. The news coming down as Alex Anthopoulos came to talk to reporters. I was sitting in that room. It was highly unorthodox, and he comes in to give the post-game comments instead of Brian Snitker and revealed that there had been ongoing discussions with Chris Sale, who wanted to try to pitch, was feeling like at times this week that he could have thrown if they needed him to, but back spasms sidelining Chris Sale. So Grant Holmes found out about 30 minutes before that game that he was going to be pitching. And man, he delivered a just big time for the Braves to at least get things started. And the Atlanta bullpen after him was able to do an awful lot as well. How about Daysbel Hernandez? In addition to Dylan Lee, you had Reynaldo Lopez in this mix, and then Jimenez and Iglesias able to close this thing out. So the pitching center stage, just enough offense in that second game, but I don't think you can say enough about the job that was done on the mound in game 2 for the Braves to punch their ticket to the postseason. And I think that's apropos, considering that the pitching staff has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for this club all year long.
Another shutout for this pitching staff. And look, you can look at the opponent that they were facing, but you still got to go out there and throw the pitches and get it done. And Grant Holmes, I mean, he's been huge. You talk about Grant Holmes and Spencer Swellenbach, a couple of rookies this year. And a lot of people talk about the Braves farm system. I know Grant Holmes, he's a little bit older, maybe not necessarily a prospect, but this farm system continues to churn out guys who come up and just make an impact. And those two guys, Swellenbach and Grant Holmes, I mean, they're another one of those players that where would this team be without him? And Grant Holmes delivers in a big spot here. I mean, 7 strikeouts in 4 innings. He had 16 swings and misses in 4 innings. And like I said, I know he wasn't facing an A lineup and facing a team that didn't have much to play for, but still, I thought he looked really good. And he's looked like that a lot this year. It's not like he just did it in this game. I mean, we've seen him do that in other games this year. So he's been an incredible find for the Atlanta Braves. He's stepped up, and that's what you've needed. I mean, you think you got Chris Sale going into game 2, and no matter what happens in game 1, you're feeling pretty good about your chances. And then 40 minutes before that game's supposed to start, we learn, Braves may have already known, but we learned that Chris Sale's scratched, and Grant Holmes learns that he's starting the biggest game of the year for the Atlanta Braves, a game they must win. So what an incredible performance by him. But Daysbel as well, coming in, getting out of a jam. He's been great. And then Lopez getting an inning too. So, the pitching staff certainly doing what they've done for most of the season.
Yeah, and it was much needed on this day to go ahead and get some normalcy back after a crazy 8th and 9th innings in game 1. The Braves able to go out and have a lot more straightforward affair in game 2 as they won by a 3-0 score to punch their ticket and advance to the wild card round, shutting out the Mets to clinch in that game. I mean, it's hard in a lot of ways to put a day like this into words, but I would say it was a microcosm of this entire season, the roller coaster ride that they've been on. I talked to a bunch of guys after the game, Travis d'Arnaud, Austin Riley, AJ Minter. 2 of those guys I mentioned to you are not going to be able to help the Braves in the postseason. I talked with Charlie Morton, a guy that I'm sure wanted to do a lot more so that the Braves didn't have to have this stress on the final day. But hearing from all of them, hearing from Brian Snitker and others just in that clubhouse celebration, you just kind of looked around and thought, wow, this team and everything it's been through still somehow found a way at the very end, down to the wire with their backs against the wall, to get into October and have a chance to get into the postseason and at least see if they can get hot.
I mean, it's just so 2024 Braves where you're getting into the last game of the season. You need to win it to clinch. And what happens? You get an injury. I mean, that has been the season for this Atlanta Braves team. And they get in, and yet here we are talking about another injury. And it just feels like that's been the case all year long. But for this group to be able to still get it done. And look, we talk about it coming into the season. It was all World Series or bust. But nothing's guaranteed. Nothing is given in this game. You heard Snicker talk about that afterwards. You cannot expect these things to happen, and you have to be grateful for them when they do. And the Braves were able, throughout all of that, to get a chance. And we'll see what happens. Certainly the pitching is off right now, but the Braves are in and they got an opportunity.
Yeah, we'll delve into that as we continue on the Braves postcast. They don't really care how they got there. They're just happy to be in the postseason, and they're going to have to sort out a lot on their flight out to San Diego, where they'll get started with the Padres on Tuesday night in a best 2 out of 3 scenario in this wild card round. So a lot to get to as the Braves postcast continues. We'll delve into some more of Monday's doubleheader. We'll talk about what the injury to Chris Sale does to the Braves pitching plans. And of course, we will preview the wild card matchup to come between the Braves and the Padres. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets for your first $5 bet guaranteed on FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com and get started today. Well, Jake, 2 incredibly different games for the Braves on this day, but if there was a bit of a common thread, what the pitching staff was able to do from a starting standpoint would probably be 2 of the more unheralded players for the Braves, or at least guys that you didn't have on your list to say, if it comes down to game 161 and 162 to get the Braves into the postseason, Spencer Schwellenbach and Grant Holmes are going to be the guys getting the ball to start 2 games of a doubleheader on what felt like a pretty unprecedented day for both of these teams, the Mets and the Braves, to find their way into October on what was an extra day of the season. Everybody else wrapped up on Sunday. They had to finish their business Monday in this doubleheader. But you look at what Spencer Schwellenbach did in game 1. I know that was the 8-7 loss, but it's just the latest in a long line of great starts against him, especially against the New York Mets, against whom he has allowed 2 runs in 21 innings this season, 7 innings of 1-run ball on Monday. And then you have Grant Holmes come out in a spot start for Chris Sale and do 4 innings of shutout ball with 7 strikeouts. So a lot coming out of 2 rookies in very different stories on how they got to the big leagues. Spencer Schwellenbach didn't have a whole bunch of pro innings under his belt. Grant Holmes had about a decade's worth of time in the minor leagues to get himself ready for this. But unsung, unheralded, whatever you want to call them, these are 2 guys that stepped up big. And I would imagine moving forward, they're going to have a place in whatever the Braves are trying to do over the next month.
It'd be interesting to see what the Braves do with Grant Holmes in the offseason. And they've kind of gone back and forth with him as a reliever and a starter. We've seen with Ronaldo Lopez. It feels like that's kind of been a theme around Major League Baseball this year. It feels like there's been a lot of starters who have been turned back into relievers. We'll see if that's what they look to do with Grant Holmes, who, again, has looked really well in that role at times. But the story to me is Spencer Schwellenbach, and just coming out of nowhere. I mean, he started the year in high A, and here he is pitching some of the biggest games of the year, and he's delivered. And I know we talk about it every time that he pitches, Grant, but for me, it's just that mound presence. It's that, just that ability on the mound to not let the moment get too big for him. And again, for a guy that doesn't have a lot of experience as a starter. I mean, I know he's 24, but he just doesn't have a lot of experience on the mound as a starter. And here he is starting the biggest games at the highest level, and he just looks unfazed by it. And he obviously has the stuff. He has the command. I mean, he was coming out pumping 97, 98 today. Even that's why another reason I said in the 7th inning, he was pumping 97 in there. I said, give this kid another inning, see what he can do. I mean, he looked great. It's impressive. And I know a lot of fans are sitting around wondering, okay, when is that patented AA extension coming? I think he's certainly, has proven he can be a big piece of this rotation going forward for a while.
Well, I don't think we can be surprised by the latest chapter of Spencer Schwellenbach's rookie season, but with Chris Sale down, Holmes stepping up big in that way, that got the attention, I think, of a lot of Braves fans, because I know that there had to be a collective groan of, oh no, here we go again with an injury at the worst possible time. All of the narrative that was built around the final really 5 games of the season was, when you need Chris Sale, that's when you'll start him if you face elimination at any point. And the Braves somehow, after some things went right, all of a sudden found themselves very much in need of Chris Sale and facing elimination, and he was not able to go. The back spasms apparently cropped up originally, according to Alex Anthopoulos, in the Cincinnati start. And we saw the dip in velocity, particularly over the final couple of innings there. It was kind of an on again, off again thing where Chris Sale said he has pitched through this for the majority of the season. It's back spasms. It's not necessarily something that needs to put you on the IL, but it can be pretty debilitating and keep you from being able to go out and pitch. And when talking to Chris Sale prior to game one, he basically, I think, ended up in that place where I don't know if I'm going to be effective or not, and things had not calmed down enough. And you don't want to take that chance of him going out there and possibly making that worse or injuring himself in some other way and being unavailable moving forward. So the Braves decided not to push it and to be cautious with it and to figure it out. And I'm sure the hopes were, hey, we win game one and we don't worry about this Chris Sale thing for another 24, 48, 72 hours. We figure it out in the wild card round if we have to. But yeah, things went a little bit sideways there. And I don't think anybody was more disappointed about not being able to get out there and pitch in these big moments and in these times than Chris Sale, who had been just dynamite all season long. They had arrested him, moving along as well. And I think maybe, Jake, we understand a little bit more about why they were taking good care of Chris Sale with those extra days, because he has pitched through some stuff all season long.
Yeah, it makes sense now. I don't know, fans were obviously speculating when, they weren't going to push him up to start the first game of that Mets series. And then when you didn't start him on that Friday after the 2 rain delays, obviously a lot of speculation from fans at that point. But you want to make sure that he is healthy. And as you said, nobody wants to pitch in these games more than Chris Sale. If you've learned anything as a Braves fan this year and watching Chris Sale, he wants to be out there competing, and he'll do everything that he can. It's just unfortunate timing for him. And hopefully it does get, healed up quickly and he can still be a part of this postseason run for the Braves. But not ideal, obviously, to lose, the Cy Young winner, the guy who just won the Triple Crown, you not have him available when you need him the most.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into our wild card preview in the next segment. But, we got to talk a little bit about the Braves offense in game one. And in particular, one guy who there was a lot of commentary about, why is Ozzie Albies batting second? You and I have had those comments. I quote tweeted some dummy that said maybe he shouldn't be batting second. And spoiler alert, the dummy was me, because he hit a 2-run homer in his first at bat. And as if that wasn't enough, after getting on base, 3 times up to that point, Ozzie Albies comes through with a bases clearing double in what looked like maybe the Braves' best comeback of the day. Now, Francisco Lindor spoiled that. But, Jake, you needed to see some signs of life from Ozzie Albies. You love to see it in a big game. And Ozzie, to me, has always been one of those players. And this is why I did say I feel like he's a net positive, because he's one of those guys you just want to go out there and go to war with. And he's been a big part of the Braves in going to battle in the postseason or over the long grind of a regular season. He just brings a certain energy that's invaluable to this club.
He's a leader of this team, and we've talked about it. He is certainly that guy. When you have him in the clubhouse, he can kind of lift a team up. And you're talking about even between games. Everybody was they made some comments about Ozzie and what he was saying in between games to try to get the guys going for the second game after losing a tough one there. And that game one, it felt like the Ozzie Albies game, and that hit that he had, it just felt like that was the moment that you win that game after a big hit, a big game from Ozzie Albies, who, oh, by the way, made a great play at second base as well in that one too. So you felt like that was just going to be the Ozzie Albies game, the Ozzie Albies moment that maybe just kind of gets him going. And maybe it still does. He had a hit in the second game, but just, great performance by him. And a lot of talk by us, by a lot of people on social media. We weren't talking about why is he in the lineup, but why is he batting second in this lineup? Right. And he certainly, helped himself with that game one and being able to produce that hit, like I said, in the 8th. I mean, that got me up out of my seat screaming.
Right guy, right spot, obviously right time for the Braves in game one. Unfortunately, couldn't do it all by himself, but a 2-hit, 5 RBI game, gets on base 4 times, also drew a couple of walks. Ramon Laureano had 3 hits, including a home run in the opener as well, and a run batted in from Jared Kelenic, who was kind of key in that 8th inning as the Braves were looking to get themselves rolling and do it against Edwin Diaz, which, that's a small world with Kelenic and Diaz going head-to-head, considering that was a rather large trade that Jared Kelenic was involved in quite a few moons ago. But either way, good to see Jared Kelenic in the midst of that as well for Atlanta. The 3-0 win in game 2, again, much more straightforward. Marcell Ozuna with a 2-run single, Gio Urshela with an RBI that brought home Jorge Soler. That came in the second. The Ozuna 2-run single came in the 7th inning, and the 3 runs were enough because after they were charged with 5 runs in the first game between them, Raisel Iglesias and Joe Jimenez getting just 1 out as well between the two. They both had scoreless innings after Reynaldo Lopez used his throw day to come in and give the Braves a scoreless inning with a couple of strikeouts. He looked great. Dylan Lee also came in, had a hold, and Daysbel Hernandez. I know we don't have a ton of time to talk about it, and we have talked extensively about the pitching on this day, but a lot of guys played a part, and everybody deserves to have their name called.
They do. Daysbel, we've talked about a guy that's, I think going to move up. And the only question that's ever really been there for Daysbel is the command. But certainly in this one, able to get a couple of strikeouts and throw some big innings there. Lopez, that you mentioned, kind of a bullpen day, a throwing session day, as you mentioned, and glad to be able to get him an inning. And then I thought it was big for Jimenez and Iglesias to both come out there and to be able to close the door after the game they had. I thought that was great. I also thought the hit for Ozuna, which obviously gave the Braves a little bit of cushion. Ozuna's been struggling a little bit here lately, so I thought that was big for him too.
Yeah, really quiet final week for Marcell Ozuna. I think going into that final at bat, he might have been 2 for 25 over this final homestand, and that's very un-Marcell Ozuna-like. He has not had very many extended slumps, and that might have been one of his worst weeks of the entire year, because even though the power had faded a bit in September, he was still collecting his base hits, and those all of a sudden became fewer and further between. But he got one when the Braves really wanted that insurance. But how crazy would it have been to go through everything he went through in the first game and then win the second game 1-0? Fortunately, the Braves didn't have to, because Marcell Ozuna took that part of the drama out of it. But I also feel like that breathing room, everybody appreciates that, maybe just for their own sanity or their health. I don't know, maybe a combination of the two. But the Braves are able to find their way into October. It took a lot of different guys to do it over the course of this season, and a lot of guys to do it over the course of this doubleheader as well. When we come back, we'll talk a lot about the wild card, how the Braves are set up, what the rest of the National League playoff picture looks like. And, of course, we'll look into the pitching matchups that are going to have a few question marks for the Braves, I think, for at least another few hours. And we'll get into all of it next on the Braves Postcast. Let me tell you about the best way to buy tickets to everything. It's Game Time. Download the app today and try out the new features. One of them called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier, because Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. And it's not just sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And you get that panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find lower price tickets that are comparable. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem the code. It's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Well, let's get into it, because the Braves have a very quick turnaround, and they have to cross the country, and that is what they're doing as we speak here, recording this late on a Monday night. As you look at where the wild card ended up, we knew there were some question marks for this doubleheader that went beyond just the Mets and the Braves, because the Arizona Diamondbacks were waiting with bated breath to see if the Mets or the Braves could sweep their opponents, and if they split, the Diamondbacks were going to be out. And that is how that played out, which means that the Mets will take on the Brewers. Winner is going to get Philadelphia of that series. Braves take on the Padres. The winner gets the LA Dodgers in the division series. So, as the saying goes, Jake, buckle in.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Obviously, love postseason baseball. It's a different season. We've seen that, obviously, the past 3 years, especially. The Braves got in there. They didn't have much. Many didn't expect much of them in 2021. They go on to win. Last year, everybody was picking them to win, and they get bounced. And then the Rangers, who barely got in, won it all. So it's a very different season when you get into October baseball. So the Braves certainly have a chance. Everybody starts at 0. Unfortunate for the Diamondbacks. Again, they put themselves in that spot, but you just knew whoever won that first game was really going to be no incentive for them in that second game. But the Braves do get in either way, and they go out to San Diego. It's going to be a tough challenge, but again, it's a new season. They got an opportunity.
Yeah, the Padres have been one of the better teams in baseball in the second half, and particularly down the stretch. They gave the Dodgers a little bit of a run in the last week or 10 days as far as the National League West title was concerned before coming up short there. Of course, the other big story of the day we've discussed, Chris Sale scratched as the game 2 starter in the doubleheader. Brian Snitker telling reporters, including myself after the game, that Sale is unlikely to be in the Braves wildcard plans, which means they have to make alternate arrangements for a game 1 starter. Now, among the names that have come up are some pitchers that are throwing in Gwinnett, Ian Anderson, A.J. Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop, and Bryce Elder. All of those guys have been staying ready. This is clearly the case of all hands on deck is going to extend far beyond the final weekend of the season or the doubleheader to close the season. It's going to extend right on into game 1 of a wild card series against a very tough San Diego team, and that's going to be a tall order for anybody that gets tapped as the Braves' number 1 starter. But crazier things have happened than people coming up big in the postseason and making a name for themselves.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see which way they go. Maybe Chris Sale wakes up and feels good. I know a lot of Braves fans are hoping for that. It doesn't seem like that's likely, but Ian Anderson's a guy that has really good postseason experience. I don't know that the Braves do that without at least letting him get his feet wet in the big leagues again this year. But certainly, again, he has the postseason pedigree. Bryce Elder, we've kind of been down that road. A.J. Smith-Shawver, kind of unproven right now at the big league level and obviously still very young. But you got to do something. You at least have to get a fresh arm up there that can give you innings after all the innings that you had to cover on Monday in this game. I think you got to get somebody else up there to try to help you, piece this thing together. Yeah. Jesse Chavez, I think maybe one of the only guys that didn't throw on this day, and he could probably give you a couple of innings, but you're going to have to do something to try to pick up the innings on Tuesday.
Yeah, you are. I mean, and you look at it in Grant Holmes. I mean, Snitker said, if I had known that Chris Sale was truly not going to be available, I would have stayed away from Grant Holmes on Sunday. But the Braves were trying to do what they could to, keep the game close and manage it the best they could. So Grant Holmes has been a very busy man, but I doubt that he's going to be very busy in game 1 of the wild card series, unfortunately, because of how much he has had to throw. So you're right. Not too many guys that have gotten out of this weekend and, of course, the doubleheader without having to do some work. It'll be interesting to see where Joe Jimenez and where Raisel Iglesias are after doing double duty in this particular game as 2 of the higher leverage relievers that the Braves have. And keeping in mind, this wild card is all played in San Diego and is played in 3 consecutive days. There are no days off. So you pretty much have to have your plan ready. And in game 2, I believe that would be Max Fried. And then game 3, Reynaldo Lopez is how that could line up. I don't really see a scenario where you push Fried up and have him throw on short rest. I don't know about you.
No, definitely not. I think you try to get through game 1 as best you can. Maybe you get a chance. Maybe your offense scores some runs for you and you're able to steal one. But I think the Braves got to be hoping, Max Fried can deliver in game 2. You get Reynaldo in game 3 if you can't, find a way to piece it together for game 1. But I'll tell you this, Grant, there's going to be no excuses for too many off days this year. The Braves found a way to make sure there's no off days from the end of the regular season into the postseason this year.
Yeah, no, nobody's going to be talking about that down in Atlanta. The other cities can worry about that. Maybe the Phillies can figure that whole thing out. Good luck to them in whatever it is that this layoff is going to do. And I say that, with all seriousness, of course. As far as the Padres and their side of things, the game 1 starter is Michael King. Then it's going to be Joe Musgrove and Dylan Cease, the top 3 arms in the rotation for the Padres. King had an incredible year, 13-9, a 2.95 ERA. 201 punch-outs and 173 2/3 innings. Maybe one of the better pitchers, Jake, that nobody really talks about in the National League. And not because he's not known in San Diego or maybe out west, but for those of us on the East Coast to go to sleep maybe before we saw all the work he's done this year, he might open some eyes in October.
Yeah, and probably because he was in that Soto deal too, and maybe gets overlooked a little bit. But he's been a big piece of that Padres team, who gave up Juan Soto, one of the better hitters in baseball. But they obviously benefited greatly from it as well, getting a guy like King who's going to be their game 1 starter, and that's from a team that also traded for a Dylan Cease, who was right there with Chris Sale for the most strikeouts in baseball this year. So it's a really good pitching staff. Joe Musgrove's obviously been very good for them, and he's got some postseason pedigree. He had a big start against the Mets a couple of years ago. So yeah, it's going to be a tough challenge for this Braves offense. Michael King, as you mentioned, really, he got off to a slow start too this year, but then really picked it up after a slow month of April, and it's just been really good. And the 4 starts in September, he gave up a combined 4 earned runs. So yeah, he's even gotten better as the season's gone on.
Yeah, he's been extremely good, and I'm not knocking him to say that he's not being talked about. I'm saying he hasn't been talked about enough for the kind of season that he's had, and he will be a tough task for a Braves offense that, as we know, can vary greatly from game to game and from day to day, but not a lot of margin for error for the bats. They've got to be able to back up and really support whatever the pitching plan looks like in game one above all else. You feel a little bit differently, I think, with a Max Fried and a Reynaldo Lopez in terms of being able to go blow for blow with guys like Joe Musgrove and Dylan Cease. But game one is going to be a lot of variables for the Braves to sort out. But some offense would go a long way, that's for sure. Wild card series, game one, Tuesday night. It is pitcher still to be determined for Atlanta against Michael King of the Padres. It's an 8:38 p.m. Eastern time first pitch, game one of three, and it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in this series, and the winner advances to play the Los Angeles Dodgers. Well, that's going to wrap things up for the regular season versions of the Braves postcast. It was a 2-for-1 special on the final day, and it ended up being a pretty special day as the Braves managed to get back to October by winning the regular season finale and splitting a doubleheader with the Mets on an unprecedented day where not one but two teams ended up finishing their night celebrating on the same field to go to the postseason. It was just, I don't know. I don't know how you button up the 2024 season for the Braves, but fortunately, we can keep talking about it for a little while longer. Braves and Padres will get things started on Tuesday. Jake, as always, it was good to talk about what was an eventful day for the Atlanta Braves, and we've got some good stuff ahead of us.
Yeah, I mean, what better way, I guess, to finish this 2024 regular season with just an oddity that we've never seen before. Two teams playing in doubleheader, both of them win, both of them get into the postseason. That's 2024.
Why not? The 2024 Braves continue their odyssey out west in San Diego. Game one of the Wild Card Series coming your way on Tuesday. We will catch you after that. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. Until then, so long, everyone.